We'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which this podcast was recorded, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. We pay our respects to elders past and present.
It's April 2020 and Gary Jubelin is making his way into court. It's something he's done many times in his role as a seasoned New South Wales police detective. He's led some of the country's biggest cases and is responsible for bringing down many of Australia's most notorious criminals, murderers, gangsters, and even serial killers. After spending 34 years with the police force, 25 of those on the homicide squad, attending court to give evidence is a routine occurrence. But this time, it's different. Gary isn't here to give evidence against a suspected murderer. He's here to face the judge himself.
His former colleagues agree Gary Jubelin is driven.
I have done nothing wrong and I will continue to defend myself in regards to this.
I'm Middleton, and this is Head Game. Today, an extraordinary insight into the psychology behind some of the biggest cases in Australian criminal history and what it feels like to become the focus of your own investigation. Gary Jubelin, welcome to Head Game. It's great to have you on.
Thanks very much, Ian.
How are you feeling? What's it like being on the other side?
I reckon it's easier. I say that and you haven't even asked me a question yet, so I'll temper that with let's see how it goes, but very relaxed.
I'm fascinated with what you used to do and the psychology behind detective work, because psychology behind what I do with recruits, with clients as such, is people wanting to better themselves, people wanting a more positive mindset, people wanting to become a better version of themselves. So I tap into the good people, into the psychology of good people. However, you tap into the psychology of bad people and evil people, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
So I'm fascinated to know how that works, how you cope with that. And before we get into the nitty gritty, let's start off with where it all started. What made you want to join the police force?
I'd like to say it was something noble to serve the public, but in all honesty, I was working in the building game and I saw a couple of cops chasing a bad guy down the road and I thought, that looks like fun. I'd been in the ceiling all day on a hot day, sweaty, and I thought I wouldn't mind a piece of that, and I applied the next day. And from I wasn't a person that grew up to be a career cop. It wasn't a police family or whatever, but it felt like the right fit the moment I got down to the academy and thought, yeah, this is what I want to do.
Did you realise when you joined the police force that the psychology that was required of you was going to be there from the off? It was going to, boom, hit you like a smack in the face.
I didn't realise how much, but the more you are dealing with people, that's policing at its core. You're dealing with policing. So the psychology came into it pretty quick. I like to think I had enough emotional intelligence to work out, what is the way to deal with people. You'd see the old weather-beaten uniform sergeant in there when someone's misbehaving in the dock, and he didn't escalate the conflict, he'd de-escalate the conflict because he just knew how to talk to people, and that sort of impressed me, that type of policing and the psychology of it, understanding what's making these people do things and be able to do your job around that aspect.
And is that what got you into detective work? Because when you first joined, you're Bobby on the beat as such, going through the motions of earning your stripes, and then detective work. When did you first think, right, I want to become a detective? Was it because of the psychological aspect of the job?
What I found, I enjoyed my time in uniform. You have to serve minimum of 2 years in uniform, which I think everyone needs that. It's good experience, broad experience. I got into tactical policing. I like that side of it, the riot squad, then the tactical teams. I enjoyed that. But I went to a crime scene. I think it was a murder, and my role in the uniform was set up and preserve the crime scene. And I see these detectives rock in, and they look like cool dudes. And they lifted the tape
off the TV, right?
Yeah.
We've all seen it.
They were probably dickheads, I don't know, but they look cool. They walked in and then came out a short time later with this knowing look on their face and wandered off. And I'm going, that's interesting. And I thought, okay, that might be the way to go. back in those days, you had to wait till you got a tap on the shoulder, like a detective would say, "Hey, we've been watching what you do. How about you give it a try in plain clothes?" And they'd try you out. If you fitted the mould that they wanted or could work, then you got invited to apply.
And the psychological side of that job, being a detective, when you tip up on a crime scene, you pull that tape up, you go in, do you literally immerse yourself into the criminal's mindset? Do you have to do that?
I think as a good detective, you have to. You have to do that. And, some people just seem to have a natural aptitude for it. If I walked into this studio and it's a crime scene, I'd be making some observations that would be telling me something. Was this crime planned? If there was a body here, did they plan it? What did it escalate? Did it panic? That type of thing that you can take away from a crime scene. So you trust your instinct, you build on your experience. I spent, over 25 years investigating homicide. But every day
25 years.
Yeah. So every day I went to work, I still learnt something. You learn, you accumulate all this experience. But definitely crime scene is where you start, and you manage the crime scene, especially today's DNA and the forensic improvements. You just got to be very thorough and very detailed on looking at the crime scene. And from a detective's point of view, a bit of an instinct. If the body's half buried, these guys have panicked. If they've gone to a lot of planning and then the body's turned up, well, they've made a mistake. Little things like that tell you something about the person that's committed the crime.
Jumping into the mindset of a murderer, of a serial killer, of a criminal, how hard is that to do, and how hard is it to come out of that?
It's a dark place. You do go to a dark place, and this is the way I'm speaking for myself, the way I approach interviews. I fully invested in it. Before I walk into an interview room, I'd be nervous. I'd prep as much as I can. Knowledge is power in the interview room. Know as much as I can, not just in my head, so I could just, okay, you say something, I can counter that with this. So really sharp, ready to go in. Before I'd go into an interview room, I'd go to the bathroom, splash some water on my face, and take a couple of deep breaths. And on the.
Is that because you knew that you were going to go into a dark headspace, into a bad headspace, or was it a case of right? I just need to be fresh.
I need to be on my game, because quite often the interview room was my favourite place. That was the sharp end of policing from a detective's point of view. That's the culmination of all your work, and you're going to go in there. I'm going in there and I'm going to try and get a confession out of you, or I'm going to try to get evidence from you that will, either convict you or lead to you being acquitted. So the stakes are high. If I'm sitting opposite someone in that's a person of interest in a murder investigation, the only thing I've got to offer them is you're going to spend the rest of your life in prison. So you walk into that room and you create an environment. Now, it mightn't be intimidation. I can sit up and
the moral high ground as such.
Or I can be very relaxed. I could be a little bit, bit all over the place. You've got to think, what's the best way to approach this communication?
And what are you trying to do there? You're trying to create a connection, a common ground, or what are you trying to do when you go in, and how do you know what sort of stance or what approach to take?
You've got to be adaptable. And this is, I would lecture when I was in the police on interview techniques, and it's about being adaptable. Listening to what the person has to say. I saw a lot of young detectives, and I'm talking like this wise old man. I was trained. I was that young detective at one stage. And they'd be so nervous that they're asking the person of interest, the suspect, a question, and then just sort of not listening to the answer. And you've got to actually listen to the answer. You've got to have a conversation, and you can't be judgmental, especially in homicide. That's I might be talking to a murdering pedophile, but I'm not going to project, you disgust me, I hate you, anything you say. I sit there and I'm not giving out any vibe. I'm just sucking it all in.
How do you retract that? How do you control those emotions, knowing that you're going into someone that's potentially raped someone, killed someone, and you have to put all of that aside to gain common ground with someone that ultimately repulses you, or you want to take a different approach, but you have to complete. Is there a technique that you use before you go in, or do you just adapt when you get into the room?
My job is to find out what happened. If someone's been murdered, and it's a big responsibility. If you're leading an investigation to find out if why someone was murdered, who murdered the person. So, I can't let my own ego feelings or whatever walk in. I want to belt that person. You do your job. What's your job is to find out if this person is involved. And look, I'm talking like they're all involved. I go in there with a mindset that, okay, this person could be a suspect, but I also look for the fact maybe they're not. Maybe the line of questioning, okay, he's just answered that or she's answered that way. That shows or telling me they haven't done it. Do I get angry? Do I, feel dirty about it? I'd go in and, it might be a case if I sit down and speak to someone, I might shake their hand. I might know this person is a pedophile. I might know this person is a murderer. But what am I doing here? I'm doing my job. So I allow them to tell me. I don't let them see that they're shocking me because I think that lets them have a little victory over me anyway. Yeah. I had one particular...
It's all psychological game, isn't it? It's psychological warfare. Yeah. It's the little winces, it's the little movements, it's the little signs that telltale signs that give it away, give the game away, isn't it?
And I look how people react. Probably I could, if to improve it, probably listen to the spoken word a little bit more, the detail of the word, but I'm watching how they react. So if I'm asking a question, I'm thinking, okay, what was the reaction? I put myself in their position. How would I feel if I was coming in there? And that's when I say is knowledge is power. We're not allowed to, in New South Wales, and it's pretty well across the board, no threat, promise or inducement. So I can't come in, we know you've done it.
No threat, promise or inducement.
So it sort of narrows it down. But if they feel intimidated because I'm so professional, well, that's not going to throw their case out. So I come in there. The other thing, this is when I'm instructing young detectives or police on interview techniques, you own the interview room. You have been in more, unless you're up against a real good crook, you have been in more interview rooms than that crook has been or that suspect. So when you walk in there, you have a confidence. This is my place. You own that room. What does that do? Is that intimidating? I don't know. I'm thinking if I was in the suspect's point of view, I wouldn't like to see a confident, clearly well-prepared detective walk in and start asking me questions. I'd start to be feeling a little bit nervous. And it's also about the timing. It's about your mannerisms. This is from a detective's point of view, and listening to their response. And if they want to tell lies, let them tell their lies. Because you might be sitting on, you've said you're not at that place, we've got your DNA in that place. I'll let them tell me for 5 minutes they weren't there, they were here, and, look at this.
You can tie them up. Yeah. You're giving them enough rope to sort of hang themselves as such, right?
But from an emotional point of view, from the policing point of view, and again, I talk from my experience, sometimes I come out of those interview rooms and feel absolutely dirty and drained because I've sat opposite pure evil and I've let them get into my...
Physically dirty, as in you need to go and wash, or dirty as in you're in a bad headspace and you need to go and cleanse your mind, or do you need to go and shower? You see a lot of it where people, wash themselves because they feel physically dirty.
You feel dirty. I was going to say soul. I don't know if it's
soul. That makes sense to me.
It's that deep, but it's right into you, and it's sort of. I just
you've got
soul. That darkness that you walk out and you've had someone just talk about, and sometimes they're talking about, and these are the sadistic killers. When they're talking, they're enjoying it and they're getting off on retelling the story. So you're sitting there and you're not reacting, and you just yep, that happened. Okay, tell me what you did then. Oh well, it was really, and they get excited, reliving the crime. So you walk out of an interview room like that, and you just go, you just feel dirty because you feel like if you spend long enough in a room with anyone, you get a connection. That's just human nature.
That's important to any sort of psychology. It's important to have a connection with that individual.
Most definitely.
Now, like you said, that connection, if it's making your soul dirty, how do you come out of that? How do you cleanse your soul ultimately? Because you've just finished the interview and like you said, that connection is there. Not only do you feel disgusted because you've had to make that connection, but like you said, you've got a dirty soul.
Yeah.
How do you cleanse it? Do you take it back to your family? Does it affect your social life, your family life? How do you get out of that state of mind, I suppose? Or, how do you cleanse your soul?
You've got to let it just you got to let it unwind. Like if you can go in from that environment straight into a home environment or just a happy environment, doesn't work.
Family?
Family, yeah. And I've been around long enough to know I can't bring that to the Christmas table. You know, I might be in an interview like that and then come home.
Have you ever done that though? Have you ever taken it home?
There's been, and the way I react with it, Ant, and I look back, and it's only with the benefit of hindsight, because when you're in it, you don't really appreciate what's going on. So now I've been out of the cops for 3 years. I'm looking back, and quite often this is how I react to the stress of work, like the pressure of work. And if you're on a big operation and all that, you come home, and it could be a simple home, or it might be out with friends. Oh, do you want to go to the beach? I might say, because you know, when you're in that operation phase, and I'm sure you know it from the military, you're going to make a decisive decision. You go yes, and you can't second guess it because you've got to move on to the next decision. What I found where I would stuff up in my home life and in just my social life was that I was used to making sharp, definitive decisions and going, bang, this is what we're going to do, move on to the next one. Someone would say, what do you want for dinner? I might go, well, Indian, let's go to an Indian restaurant. What about Thai? Yeah, whatever, we'll go. You know, that's just me reflecting back, but I didn't realise it at the time. Sometimes, and it only hit me a couple of times, sometimes I got to the point where I just didn't want to face that evilness, that darkness, and I didn't realise the impact it has on you until I left the cops. And you're on call every 6 weeks in New South Wales, so any homicide that would happen in New South Wales for that week, you'd be called out to it. And so you'd be at home, you're enjoying yourself in whatever environment that is, and then the phone rings, and then you're in the middle of the night, and then you got to go. And you know you're going to invest yourself in some darkness for the next couple of days if you're lucky, if not maybe for the next couple of weeks. So it does impact on you. And I think everyone's got a different, you know, the cup half full and that. I would train, I'd keep myself fit, that helped me. Very early in my career, and I didn't realise why I was being drawn to this. I got into meditation and yoga, and I'd turn up at the yoga studio, and we're talking 30 years ago, and what's a cop doing here? Just what's a bloke doing here? Didn't know what drew me to that, but that helped me throughout my career, the physical training and the hard training and the soft training, because I knew when I was out of step with the rest of society, if that makes sense, or the social. If I'm walking down the street and 10 people have annoyed me, I'm starting to think maybe it's me, not them. So I could take myself away and do a little bit of meditation and that type of thing, and that's helped me well throughout my career.
Your job has been pure head game, you know, going from sitting down with pure evil, it completely engulfing your life. Yeah. Because it done the same to me when I was in the military, especially when I stepped over into the special forces sort of world. It completely engulfed my life. I didn't realise it at the time. Very much like yourself, it wasn't until I was out, and it took me longer, probably 8-9 years to look back in and go, whoa, you know, I prioritised the military. You know, my family came second. There were times where I took my job home. You know, I took combat home with me, and again, I'd be snappy. I'd be, you know, aggressive.
Because you're still in that mindset.
It's really, really hard when you're engulfed and you're living this, and ultimately you want results, right? I think that's what we chase. I wanted mission success. If I didn't get mission success, everything would be put aside. The family, the children. I didn't realise I was doing it at the time, but you have to, in order to do the job that you do, is very similar to the job that I done. You have to fully engulf yourself, and it has to come first. We don't like to admit it. Did the job come first over everything when you were amongst the height of your career? Yeah,
look, for whatever reason.
It's horrible to admit it, isn't it?
And you look back, well, what I've done since I've left the police and got sort of that perspective, I make a joke, but I'm only half joking. I had to go round to friends and family and apologise for being so selfish. But I could only achieve what I did in my career because they gave me the space to just disappear And then when I'd come back almost broken, they'd help put me back together again, and then I'd get ready for the next case.
And that's the thing as well. You don't realise that you're broken,
Yeah.
or you don't realise that you're struggling, or you don't realise that you haven't disconnected from a certain investigation, and they're subconsciously putting the pieces back together, joining you up and then chucking you back out into the fold, aren't they? You don't realise it until you're back. I used to think when I got back from Afghanistan, I used to think that I was the best dad in the world, but ultimately my wife was treading so carefully around me. You know, she could see the way that I had changed and that I was trying to get back into the fold straight away, but you can't, it's very hard to switch it on and off sometimes.
And the nature of the work too, and this is where I would justify it with myself. And I don't know, it's probably I'm a bit stuffed up in that it made me feel like I'm doing good work. Like if I do bad, if my relationship's failing or whatever, I'm doing some good. I'm helping, solve a murder. You had to be selfish. And and this is what I said to people that come to homicide. And as I left, by the time I left, I was a chief inspector. So I'd gone from constable, sergeant, all the way up.
Worked your way up.
I'd say homicide is not a 9-to-5 job. If you're going to come here, you've got to be prepared to bleed for the job. Now, people say, especially in this day and age, that's a bit dramatic. Well, it's not dramatic. If you
have to do it.
Yeah, if you're investigating someone's murder, go somewhere else if you're not going to give us 100%. I don't want to hear about all these excuses why you can't. Turn up. Your life might be off track, but you need to turn up and perform because it's too important, the job that we're doing.
This is what you've signed up for. This is the responsibility, the pressure that you need to be able to deal with in order to, like you said, get the job done. Because you're talking about people's lives here, right?
100%. And I'd say we're not conscripts. And I didn't like people that thought, I can balance this. And someone was saying to me just the other day, an ex-cop that I respected, and said, I laugh when I hear people say that they managed to have an outstanding career in the police at one of the sharp ends of policing. You can do some other stuff where you can balance your life, and it didn't impact on my family. And we're sort of scratching our heads going, I can't have worked too hard because
you're an officer.
That might have been the answer. But I miss things like I miss my kids' birthdays and Christmas times and different things. So it's a price that you pay. But I think those close to me knew that it was good for my soul what I was doing or what I was doing. So they gave me the freedom to do it.
And what's the most gut-wrenching investigation that you've dealt with?
One that's changed me, not just as a police officer, but changed me as a person. The way I look at this country is the Barraville murders, and 3 Aboriginal children, all living in the same street, Evelyn Greenup, Clinton Beattie and Colleen Walker, disappeared over a 5-month period in 1990-91. They were Aboriginal. They were living on a mission, and the response from the police, the response from the public was substandard. And this is not me just saying the benefit of hindsight. It's come out. There was a parliamentary inquiry. I became involved in that investigation 5 years after the disappearance, when there was a protest at the community, the Aboriginal community protest, and weren't satisfied with the response by the police. That I've been involved, and I'm speaking to family members as recently as 2 days ago, even though I'm out of the police. I went up there as a white cop. I was a homicide cop, and they formed a new investigative team to reinvestigate the matter. I didn't particularly want to go up there. This is the one time I tried to do the right thing. I'd actually put in a transfer to leave homicide to go back to work at a local police station because I had a young family and I was missing my kids. Mm-hmm. The response by the police was rip up the green form, which was a transfer form, and send me on this strike force that took me away from home for about 2 years. And what I learnt was about the racism in this country, the lack of, if it was 3 white kids in Sydney, the response would be completely different.
Oh, you believe that, did you?
100%. I marched on Parliament House, which didn't endear me to the police. We as a country should be ashamed that this happened, and we didn't provide them the response that you would expect in a situation like that. When I first went up there, I went up there with the arrogance of a cocky, homicide detective from the city and thought, oh, this'll be easy. And the Barraville community just gave it to me. And one member, she's sadly...
You took the flat, basically, straight away.
Auntie Elaine, and she was a elder, and sadly she's passed away. She just absolutely gave it to me when I got there. I turned up there with the swagger in my suit and walked on to the mission, and she just said... what do you want? And just growled at me and gave it to me. You're a white man, you're a cop, why would I trust you? She became, before she passed away, she became one of my closest friends. And she, it was just a beautiful relationship. Awesome. She'd phone me every week. And the families are like family to me now, and I stay in contact with them. They still haven't got justice. We've tried everything. We changed legislation, protests on Parliament, parliamentary inquiry. That's changed me, and it taught me the importance of, because that was fairly early in my homicide career, even though I've worked on it, because you're juggling in quite a few cases. It changed my thinking on what the important thing is in homicide, and it's about the victims' families and doing the right thing by the victims' families. I never promise people I'll solve a crime, but I say I'll do everything humanly possible. And I think on the back of what we did with Barraville, and when I talk about there's a team involved, so it's always other people involved in it. I think it restored their faith that some of these cops actually do care. And, we've cried with them, we've laughed with them. It's been such an emotional journey, and it's sort of changed me. But it made me harder in that you got to do the right thing. Homicide's important, and I see the pain that this community, these families still have to this day, that the person they believe responsible hasn't been convicted at court. But that's one that sticks with me. But it's almost like saying pick your favourite child when you say which homicide impacts on you the most, because there's so many in the families that you deal with. The ones, sometimes with a homicide investigation, you might wrap it up in 4 or 5 weeks. It's a sort of smoking gun one, so you don't have as much time with the families. It's the ones that are more protracted where you get to know the families more. And a lot of people that I've dealt with over the years have become good friends, and these are the families of the murdered victims.
God, talk about two different mindsets, two different head games, the suspect and the victims.
Yeah.
Was it hard to jump between the two, because one minute you're talking to the victims, you're in a completely different headspace.
Yeah.
The next you're across the table from a suspect that is evil. How easy or how hard is it to flick between the two?
I think it worked for me in that I get to know the victims, I get to know the victim's family, I get information, and I get highly motivated.
Different emotional connection, right?
Different emotional connection. But you've got to just open up your emotions. Homicide is an emotional thing. And, we can all walk around being big, tough cops. And, I can be a tough cop. I am a tough cop, or was a tough cop. But emotion goes a long way. Since I've left the police, and it sort of dawned on me more that I've had people come on the podcast I do, ex-cops that I speak to, detectives that I looked up to, my mentors, people that trained me. And the consistency in what they say is empathy. What makes a good detective? Empathy. Now, people don't expect that answer, but I know that's what I look at someone, if I had someone on the team that could understand what the emotions are. If someone's getting angry, they'd understand why they're getting angry. And that empathy and understanding, I think that's crucial for a skill of a detective.
That's humanity, isn't it? Empathy is humanity. It's the same with a soldier. People think that we go out and we let out these armories and we go out and kill the enemy. It's like, no, we're there to preserve life. If we don't have to pull the trigger, then we won't.
And then I had, I learnt so much from policing, and I met so many good people. But that's an interesting thing about homicide investigations, is that no matter what you do, you're going to be criticised and scrutinised. And I say that in that if you don't charge anyone,
the magnifying glass is ultimately on you, right? It's not on,
So when you're making that decision at 2 a.m. in the morning, you've been up since 3 a.m. the day before or whatever, you know that 6 months down the track, some highly paid barrister, probably on $10,000 a day, is going to try and make you look stupid. And so you've got to be able to justify your decisions. But homicide, you're accountable to the families, you're accountable to the media, and then in the court system, you're either at the Supreme Court, if you've charged someone, or you're at the coroner's court, all of which is pressure. And you've got to just, some of the bigger jobs I've done, and it's just thinking, where do I start? And I just fall back to tried and true what I know on the smaller, easier jobs. Just do the basics and just do them well, and the answers will hopefully come from that.
Gary, you talk about scrutiny and the magnifying glass being on you, and the sacrifice that you've given in order to help others, to solve crimes, to lock away evil and bad people, that flipped on you big time, didn't it? You went from...
you've heard, have you? I thought I could get through this interview with escaping that.
Unfortunately not. And this is not an investigation, but I know it all too well as well, because I see it in the military.
Yeah.
People who have put their lives on the line, people that are willing to give the ultimate sacrifice, which is their lives, and whether that's in a way of giving yourself completely to an investigation, spending time away from the family, time away from the kids, the sacrifice it takes to do a job like you do is unfathomed. Unless you've been in those shoes, or you are in those shoes, and you can't possibly understand it. You do all this, and then an investigation gets flipped onto yourself. Can you talk to me about that?
Yeah, I can. And I didn't see it coming at all. And
you didn't see it coming?
I didn't see it coming. There was a couple of people that I was working with that I didn't have a lot of respect for, but I didn't see it coming. Like over 30 years doing what I do, hadn't had a sick day, just keep turning up. And to put it in context, just so people understand what happened. So I was running an investigation into disappearance of a small child, William Tyrrell. 8 years ago, William disappeared. I didn't lead the initial investigation. I was put in charge of the investigation 5 months after, and they asked me to take over the investigation. It was a difficult one, but I was on it for 4 years. We had some highs, lows. It's with a situation like that, it was trying to just work through the list of suspects, and we had a lot of suspects. Working through that as a homicide detective, I talk about the life of a homicide detective. So just to give you a sense of where I was at in the headspace, that weekend I was on call, and that weekend I got called out. 2 police officers had been shot, and I got an early morning call and flown up to Tamworth to oversee that investigation. That was my weekend. I came back, and then there was a murder up at Newcastle, 2 hours sort of north of Sydney. I drove up there to oversee that. So that's how I'd spent my 3 days. And then I'm back in the office, and the boss came up to me, and my mother said, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all, but came up to me and couldn't contain the smile and said, internal affairs are upstairs to speak to you. With that, I've gone upstairs. It's like going up to the headmaster's office. It's no good comes from level 9.
I know that feeling as well.
You've been there.
Right, the CEO wants to see you, the commanding officer. I'm like, not again, again.
Search warrants executed on me for allegations that I recorded a conversation with a person of interest in the William Tyrrell matter on my phone, which I did. And I
so you admit it, you did.
I admit it. There was no problems with it. I believe I had under the Listening Devices Act, I had justification to do it. So do a lot of informed legal people. But anyway, put that aside. I'm talking from the emotional point of view. So I was interviewed, or a search warrant executed on my phones. My phones were taken off me. My gun was taken off me. My keys were taken off me. Everything was taken off me. And I walk out of the police headquarters about 6, 7 o'clock at night.
So you were stripped?
Just stripped of everything.
Did you feel naked when you walked out there?
I felt violated. And I was just sort of numb, going, how the hell has this gone on? And I'm trying to remember numbers. I haven't got numbers. I remembered my sister's number. I got myself on the train.
So they've taken everything, your phone, they've not given you anything?
Nothing. Like taken everything. And this person, and I don't pull back on this, and a person I don't respect, senior person, said to me, oh, well, you'll probably go off sick now. And I said, no, I'll be turning up to work tomorrow, and I'll be turning up dressed like this and ready to work. I come back to work the next day, and then hasn't hit the media at this stage. It hasn't hit the media, and I've come back to work. I'm not allowed access to the homicide office, an office I'd worked in for 20 years, and I wasn't allowed in there. And I've walked in there thinking, well, we're recording a conversation on my telephone that people already knew
to potentially catch someone that's committed a crime.
And there was listening devices that were approved by Supreme Court judges in the place where I was recording these conversations. Now, people say that's your take on it. Well, they're the facts. I've got to accept the courts. I've put people before the court, so it would be arrogant of me to say I don't accept it. I could get a whiteboard out here and could explain it. And people say, look, he hasn't learnt his lesson. Yeah, I've learnt my lesson. I've lost my career. I've lost my reputation. I've learnt lessons. But am I going to put my hand up and say I did something wrong? I gave evidence at court. I participated in all the interviews that were asked of me because I believe I was justified in what I was doing. It was for no personal gain. I'm recording a conversation. Like, what am I going to do with it? Like, sell it to the media? Like, what was the purpose of it other than protect myself? I was going in to have
someone screwed you. But it sounds like it.
Basically, and then they started leaking information about it, and it just became the main story.
So all of a sudden, you've got your own people that are turning against you. Yeah. Is that what it felt like?
I wasn't allowed to talk to people. People weren't allowed to talk to me, and I had.
So they were seeing you as that filth, as that scum, as that, even though they were probably your friends or your colleagues, but they were told to completely.
There were a couple of friends that ignored it and spoke to me, and they were victimised because of it. That friends within the police. That what are you doing speaking to him? We can't trust you if you're going to be friends with him. So they put me in this office, not dissimilar to the studio we're sitting in, no window, just a glass panel. I was told by someone loyal to me that they're trying to get you to do something stupid, walk out, abuse a boss so they can suspend you or belt someone or something. So I thought, okay, I can play this game. And I sat there and I played whale music and meditation music and just sat there as the bosses were walking past, and I'd just sit there. And I wouldn't show them how angry they had made me. That was my way of dealing with it. But then I was told I wouldn't be charged. My son, who was in the army, and he had a break, and I caught up with him over in Portugal. And when I was over in Portugal for his R&R, I got a phone call that the Barraville people said that they're meeting with some politicians and they want me to come, but the police have said, no, I can't attend because I'm corrupt. And the families have argued the point, and the politicians ended up contacting me whilst I was over in Portugal. And so that meeting was on the Monday. I flew back on the Wednesday from Portugal, land at 6, 7 o'clock in the morning. 2 hours later, I get a phone call from Internal Affairs. Look, we're going to charge you. I won't repeat what I said, but I wasn't given the fact that I was told I wouldn't be charged. And I said, we'll speak to my barrister, blah, blah, blah. I spoke to a deputy commissioner who said I wouldn't be charged. And then the next day, my barrister was contacted and said, you better hand yourself in because there's a warrant for you and they could arrest you.
Gary, a burning question I have, what was it like being on the other side?
It was, I think it's made me, and this is, I'll dig deep here, it's made me a better person in that I see that how intimidating being up against the power of the state is, and I was set up very well to fight it, but I felt it was oppressive in what has gone on. Is it humbling? Yeah, it's humbling when you've been in the police force for years and you walk in the steps of the court and you get followed from Central Railway Station all the way to the courthouse with cameras in your face, and you walk up the stairs and how humiliating that is. Has it taught me things? It's made me look at a different perspective on life. Okay, this is a thing that, and I think we all know, whether you're special forces or whether it's committed to the police, you know in the back of your mind you're only a number. Like you think you think you're.
You realise that when you leave.
Yeah. And wiser people than me have said, you realise you're giving it your all, but when it's all said and done, no one cares. And so that it's sort of taken a bit of a weight off me. Like I haven't got the pressure of, well, I didn't give up. Like I didn't give up in homicide. It was forced on me, and it was a horrible experience, a humbling experience and humiliating experience, but one that, probably the lowest point in my life was walking up the steps at the first appearance at court and the cameras were on it. It was, a lead story and for a whole range of reasons.
You went from being a detective in the shadows, which you need to operate very much like a special forces operator, to all of a sudden being exposed to the limelight, being scrutinised. How did that feel, that transition? Like you say, walking up those stairs. When you say you're in a bad head, what, as in suicidal or just in a place where you're just like, that everyone's turned against me. How do I get out of this?
It was a little bit different in that because of the nature of the work I'd done, I had a couple of high-profile cases that sort of, people knew who I was. But I was a cop. I didn't care whether people liked me or didn't like me. I'm doing my job. Then I become like the villain. This is
so a complete
it's
180,
pantomime.
right?
So I'm walking up there and I'm thinking, whatever you do, just keep your head held high. Smarter people than myself pulled me aside and said, your instinct is to fight and get angry and all that. Just don't react. Don't react. Just let it go through. Just deal with it and sort of stop me just, screaming from the lamppost. This is bullshit. What's this gone on? So I was considered in my response and my approach, but I made sure I dressed up. I'm not going hiding. As I walked up the stairs, there was a group of people up there with the cameras calling out my name and saying words of encouragement. And I'm when you've got cameras on you, you're walking stiff at the best of times. And they were families of the murdered victims and all that, and there to support me. So, pretty much what was the lowest point of my life, it was almost like a, well, fuck you moment.
Yeah. You know who you are, you know what you've done.
This is what I've worked for. The sad part about all this that's happened to me, and I think this has helped me deal with it, and we talk about what goes on in the mind, is that when I look at it, what happened to me compared to, we've got William Tyrrell still missing. His parents, his foster parents, still don't know what's happened to this poor child. I can't complain that what happened to me. I lost a career. I was cranky. There was some low points. You asked the low point. Suicide. No, I didn't get to that point. But there was a time when after I was charged, and that was so I didn't go back to work after I was charged. I just I'm out of here, and I was sitting on the lounge, and normally I train every morning. I've got my routine and very dedicated, and that dropped off for a couple of weeks. And I'm sitting there on the lounge. It's mid-morning. I'm normally up at 5 o'clock, sort of training. It's mid-morning. And I'm just sitting there and I'm thinking, have a go at yourself. What have you become?
Get a grip of yourself.
It was basically,
I've been there as well.
I had to look in the mirror, slap myself across the face and said, just get on with it. Stop. And it was stop wallowing in your own self-pity. And that was the way I dealt with it. And it breaks my heart what the families have gone through. And then to see an organisation like the police turning on each other, and I'm part of that. I'm not putting my hand up proudly. We should be all united. The whole focus should be William, find out what's happened to William, and it wasn't. And that sort of it saddens me. But you got to you got to take your knocks, and it was a hard knock. But I've got to speak to a lot of people, and you learn a lot about life, and I think you would have seen that when at the sharp end of life, when life is lost and that. And there was a father, he won't mind me saying, Ken Marslew. His son was murdered. He was working, a 17-year-old, working in a pizza shop, and he was shot with a shotgun in the back of the head in a robbery. And I spoke to Ken. I've become quite close with Ken since I've left the police. We knew each other when I was in the police, but I didn't work the case. And he said that with the anger, I said it's remarkable because he would go into prison and meet with the people that were involved in the crime that killed his son. It's just a remarkable work that he's doing. And he said, look, I haven't let the anger go, but the anger would destroy me, and I've channeled it in something positive. So he's in the restorative justice and doing a lot of work like that now, and I think that's so impressive, and that's what I've tried to do, just channel the anger into, okay, I've got an opportunity of a new career, which I would have just kept working. There would always be one more case, and I would have stayed in the cops until there was nothing left of me. Here, I've had an opportunity, I'm out, and I thought, okay, well, I'll embrace that with the same passion I went after in policing.
Gary, any regrets?
Any ones that I haven't solved sit with me, but I
still to this day.
Still to this day, but I reconcile with it. Have I done everything I can do, and that, and I'm pretty.
That's all you can do, right?
That's all you can do, and I say that to people.
And you acknowledge that? You're happy with that?
Yeah, I sit with me. With the William Tyrrell matter, where what eats away at me, if I knew that I was going to be removed in such dramatic circumstances, like I get criticised for being passionate or going too hard, I would have gone harder. Like it's a legacy, it's a stain on. I was all about the victims. That's what I was recognised for my career, and I'm quite proud of that. That it was about the victims, and letting the victims down, and the impact it's had on families. And it wasn't just the Tyrrell matter I was involved in. There was other cases I was involved in, and I still stay in contact with people. I help people that reach out to me if I can give them advice. I'm not an investigator anymore, but I can point them in the right direction and help the families. But that's probably my regret. And I look back and I think from a personal point of view, with family, I've had 2 marriages. Yeah, that's not what I started my life out. I didn't think I'd have 2 marriages. I'm not blaming the police for it. That was me. That was a whole combination of things. It's always complicated. I take real comfort from the fact that my kids, and I'm choosing words carefully here because I don't want to get too emotional, but it really, really rocked me when they said it. When all this drama came up about me being charged and hung out as this corrupt cop and blah blah blah, and one of my kids, and I think they made it on social media, a comment. And I've got a son and a daughter, and just said, "Look, we know Dad was away a lot when we were younger, but we know he was away with people that needed him more than us." So
wow,
yeah, and I get chills when I just say that. I'm getting a chill now, and that makes me look back at my career and think, okay, it's something to be proud of. And
is your soul cleansed, Gary?
I got rid of the anger, as you can see. Look, I've gone in. I've done as much as I can. I've worked as hard as I can. I couldn't have given it any more. I gave it my all. I don't mind failing. I fail at a lot of things. I'll give a lot of things a go and I'll fail. But I'm always comforted in that I gave it 100%. So when I look back at my police career, I gave it 100%. I left a stamp there. I think it's important when you do any work that what legacy do you leave? It's just a lineage. What legacy? I think I've shown that you can care, you can make a difference as just a homicide detective. You can change things, and that's what I'm proud of.
Gary, from hero to villain, and in my eyes, back to hero. Listen, it's been great talking to you. Thanks for coming on. You're an absolute gentleman. Keep being you. Your soul should be clean, mate, because what I see is nothing but a good man.
Thanks, Ant. That means a lot.
Thank you so much for joining me on Head Game. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any of our incredible stories, and leave me a review wherever you're listening. I'm Ant Middleton. Catch you again